How are we doing, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Richie Hicks Jr. Sports Podcast. We are coming off of the final game of Wild Card Weekend, which bled into Monday. Dallas Cowboys convincing win over Tom Brady and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. We are going live late here, so I'm hoping that we draw in some of our West Coast people because this obviously is going to draw some attention in Texas as well as Cali. Without further ado, we're going to talk about a California kid. Is this the end of an era? With me, as always, my co host, Mr. Mike Zappi. Is this the last time we're going to see Tom Brady? If not, where will he play in the year 2023? Go ahead, Zap. I want to have you get started, and I'm going to give you my point on this one.
I don't think – well, first of all, Richie, it's good to see you. Wow, what a night. What a great game. For a Cowboys standpoint, especially after going so long, so many years of having to suffer from all the Brady frustration. But anyways, is this Tom Brady's last game? No. Is this the last time we see Tom Brady in the playoffs? Yes.
All right. Well, I want to say this. I saw his post-game presser, and I saw him walking off the field, kissing and hugging his mom and dad. I believe that this is the final time that he will play for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers organization. He handled himself the right way, giving credit where it was due to the victorious Cowboy team. Not placing blame on anyone, taking quite a great deal of blame on his own. And I think essentially doing a casual goodbye to Tampa and thanking them for the 3 years that he had there. He had a mixed bag of results, but he did win a Super Bowl there. He made the playoffs last year, and they did have a chance to repeat, but they didn't. And this year was a very trying year. It's a little early to say what he's going to do because a lot of these guys at that age, it gives you the Favre vibes that you never really know if it's disingenuous, if it's emotion talking. I personally think the place that will make the most sense for him is the Vegas Raiders because of the Josh McDaniels connection going back to his New England days. And also because, he has been linked to his former team, the Patriots. I just don't think that at his age, he's going to be 46 next year, that he wants to deal with that kind of cold. I think the Raiders present a different kind of element. And, Raiders are only a year removed from being a playoff team. I think some would suggest that they did underachieve, and they do have a decent amount of talent on that roster. Whether it's deserved or not at his age, there will be a handful of teams that are going to want his services because of the allure of bringing in a player like that. You saw a lot of jerseys. He is what he is, and he is a legend, like him or not. But as the game goes, he really looked his age tonight, and I can't blame it solely on him. You got to give Dallas the credit. They did what you're supposed to do in a road playoff game, or in any playoff game for that matter. Run the ball with high efficiency, violently, pick up chunks, and essentially make the opposing quarterback very uncomfortable. And the Cowboys checked all the boxes. Essentially a perfect game if you take away the struggles of kicker Brett Maher. Outside of that, they really dominated every facet of the football game. And I do believe that when Brady threw that pick in the end zone, his first red zone interception since the 19 season, I believe that he swung the momentum in Dallas's favor. And at that point, Tampa was no longer able to get it back. They put together their best drive, truly their only real drive of the game, unless you want to count that late touchdown in garbage time. But I really believe that that interception swung momentum, and Dallas was not going to relinquish it at that point. So Santa Clara bound. Your Cowboys are going.
We're going to San Francisco. I'm going to say this, and I got laughed at a few times for it. I send a shout out to one of my friends. I has asked to not be named. But the Voodoo Brady, that's all Voodoo Brady, Voodoo Brady. And Voodoo Brady has a lot to tie in with Giselle. And Giselle is no longer there. And for many years, Giselle would always say, hey, you're going to do this, you're going to do that, you're going to do that. And this year, he didn't have that answer. So, not saying, hey, that's why. But for some people, that is why. Not going to say this is why for this and that. But when you talk about it from a mental standpoint, and if you're the guy that if you need to mentally win the game before you enter the game, and you don't have the person that's there to mentally build you, it showed tonight.
I do get that. I think on a bigger level, it just speaks volumes to the Buccaneers are a little bit of a better version of the residual of the super team. We talked about it on previous episodes with what happened with the Rams. Now you're seeing the ugly side of it with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Since their 2020 run, they've lost so many key components. Antonio Brown, Rob Gronkowski, Ndamukong Suh, JPP. That's just a few guys off the top of my head. And I think going back to the 19 campaign in New England, it's been proven that Tom Brady at this juncture of his career can only win when he has all of it, everything that he needs. I don't think he's the type of player that he was earlier in his career, where he could lean on a good defense, not have the quality receivers, decent guys, but not great guys. That day has come and gone. That's not what he's capable of doing anymore. He needs to be surrounded by Pro Bowlers and ultra talented people all the way around. And quite frankly, this Tampa Bay Buccaneer team was very incomplete, and their offensive line was a bit of a turnstile, especially the interior, for a good juncture of the year. The Dallas Cowboys, they've been inconsistent at different junctures of the year, but this is the good version of the Cowboys that has made people believe that they can finally get past round two, possibly go to a Super Bowl, things of that nature. The hyper-competitive NFC East, I don't think necessarily winning the division is what matters to the Cowboys nor Giants at this juncture. I think it really comes down to who's playing the best ball down the stretch, because in our division, I truly believe that on any given day, any of our top three could beat each other. There's a lot to do with momentum and how things play out, but I do believe that the NFC East is at least going to have one representative. Obviously, the winner of my team and the Eagles. Your team has a great chance. There's a distinct possibility that two NFC East teams will be playing each other for the rights to go to the Super Bowl. A lot of excitement. And, we got a rivalry renewed here. Going over the storied history of the Cowboys-Niners, this is a historic rivalry that has spanned so many different decades, one of the great rivalries in all of professional sports. And I would say that the first poignant moment of this rivalry, you got to take it back to the early 80s. The catch, Montana to Clark, helped usher in a changing of the guard. Cowboys were the NFC's team of the 70s, winning 2 Super Bowls and losing 2 very close ones to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Were it not for the Jackie Smith catch, at minimum, they're co-champs of the decade. But they still had a great decade nonetheless, winning their first 2 Super Bowls. But the Montana to Clark connection, oddly enough, Tom Brady was in attendance for that game as a child. It ushered in the Montana era. Rice joined a couple of years later. And the 49ers in the 1980s won 4 championships, possibly could have won a couple more were it not for some playoff losses to the New York Giants, to the Minnesota Vikings.
And
the Redskins. But the point is, the Niners in the 80s were the team of the decade. Similarly to what your team went through in the 70s, we were like a runner-up for the decade, winning 2 in our own right. But it's interesting, when we talk NFC, the 70s was the Cowboys, the 80s was the Niners, and there were 2 distinct events that occurred in the early 90s that swung the momentum back to Dallas big picture wise. And it's funny how things work. We talk about how Tom Brady got his opportunity. Mo Lewis changed history when he injured Drew Bledsoe.
Mm-hmm.
Something similar happened in Candlestick Park. I call it the hit. Leonard Marshall's hit on Joe Montana, which knocked him out of the title game. The Niners were in the process of going for a three-peat. And ultimately, the Giants won the game, 5 field goals, 15-13 win. Steve Young came into relief. Roger Craig fumbled. LT recovered. Matt Barr field goal. We beat Buffalo a week later. But the hit essentially put Joe Montana's 49er career in jeopardy at that point and ultimately ended it because he missed the 91 campaign due to getting benched. Then he had another injury. Steve Young, who sat for years, took over, and eventually Joe went to KC. Now, similar that you could relate to this, how Aaron Rodgers has had your number, but Brett Favre hasn't. This is a similar thing with these two quarterbacks. Joe Montana had your number, but Steve Young did not. And I believe that the famous Herschel Walker trade, which many NFL people feel was the most advantageous trade for one franchise in the history of the sport, what Dallas was able to acquire was basically the triplets. And when you look at future picks and things that they gained from the Minnesota Vikings, you're talking about Emmitt Smith, the NFL's all-time leading rusher. You're talking about Troy Aikman, the quarterback of those 3 90s Super Bowl teams. You're talking about Michael Irvin, who carried on a great lineage of Cowboys receivers wearing the number 88, whether you talk Drew Pearson, Michael Irvin, later Des Bryant, currently CeeDee Lamb. 88 is a number that is very glorious in Cowboys lore. But these two particular events truly changed the trajectory for these organizations. The Niners were still good. The Giants were still good. But the Giants knocking out Joe expedited the Cowboys jumping both of them, as well as the Redskins. The Redskins, Niners, and G-Men were all aging, and that's when the Cowboys came to prominence. But this hit and this trade were the two biggest details of what expedited it, at least in my opinion. Now, you lived through that as a fan. Give me some of your feedback if you're kind of hitting the same vibe as me with these events.
Well, I won't say it was the trade that led to all the star players. I'm going to say it was the trade that led to Jimmy Johnson realizing, oh, we just traded for this guy. If we release him, we get this draft pick.
Good one. Good point.
And it led to more and more draft picks. And, you know, that's where the game has changed a lot compared to now. Now we have the compensatory picks for it. But, you know, it was Jimmy not manipulating things, but manipulating things, you know, and we're going to sit here.
He was literally the smartest guy in the room.
Yeah, he was and that's why he got fired, because Jerry didn't like it. He didn't like the fact that a head coach was outsmarting.
It gave me the Billy Martin, George Steinbrenner vibes. Oddly enough, George Steinbrenner is an idol of your owner, Jerry Jones.
Yeah, well, touche on that one. As far as this Dallas Cowboy team goes, you know, there's a lot of similarities because, one, it took a Jimmy Johnson to come in and fix things after having so many years under a certain head coach, that being Tom Landry. Insert Mike McCarthy after so many years of Jason Garrett, and a lot of it has to do with the love effect, the trust effect, whatever you want to call it. And then now here's Mike McCarthy trying to get these players to buy into a system the same way Jimmy Johnson was trying to get the players to buy into his system. And it took a piece here, a piece there. The same thing Dallas has done, a piece here, a piece there. But it all took one word. It's believing, heart, you know, whatever word you want to look for. The one thing about that trade back then was, I mean, Herschel Walker was a dog back then.
Mm-hmm.
He was. You're talking about a Heisman Trophy winner coming out of Georgia.
And this is an era where it was the way of the world in the NFL was to take running backs early.
Running backs early, exactly. And you trade them, you go out. I mean, they drafted Troy, they drafted Irvin, they drafted Smith, but then they drafted Woodson, Stepnoski, Russell Maryland. The list goes on and on and on. But it took the knowledge and the scouting ability of one, and now that's what Dallas has now, because a lot of people don't realize that Will McClay is the guy that does that today. The reason why Dallas leads the NFL today and the most Pro Bowl players drafted since 2006, I believe it is because of Will McClay. And while he's not Jimmy Johnson, he's got a similar type of mentality. You know what I mean?
No, I get it. And, it's interesting because I see what's happening in this particular rare season where you got 3 NFC East teams still in the mix. The 49ers, who even during the era where the East ran things, they were always the other team that wasn't in the East, but that was a powerhouse. And then on the AFC side, you got Buffalo, you got Cincy regaining prominence. And it kind of gives you those 90s and 80s vibes. The Bengals went to some Super Bowls in the 80s. The Bills went to 4 in the 90s. The Giants, the Cowboys, the 49ers were powerhouses in the 90s, and this is what we're kind of getting again.
This is a season where we're going to see, not to interrupt, but this is a season we're going to kind of see the turning of the guard, honestly. And I think we see it already now with the NFC East. We're seeing a division that is young with the Giants. Daniel Jones is coming to his own. Jalen Hurts is coming to his own. Dak Prescott has been there. The Cowboys defense has gotten better. The Eagles defense is good. The Giants defense is getting better. So we're seeing that, hey, the power just might very well be in the NFC East, while we were so busy talking about other divisions last year.
Yeah, I don't think this is a one-hit wonder.
No, I don't either. I definitely don't either. And that's what people need to realize. People are so focused on what has happened instead of what is happening.
Hence the Brady talk. 92 to 94. Some of the glorious times of the NFL, definitely years that you could put in any era to say this was the golden part of the 90s. 3 consecutive NFC championship meetings, plus the Deion Sanders effect. Back in that time, you had the Packers, who were kind of like the new kids on the block that were trying to challenge the Niners and the Cowboys, but they weren't quite there yet. Brett Favre was gradually becoming the face of the league while this is happening. But as far as those 3 particular seasons go, what is interesting about this is Deion Sanders played for both teams during the height of the rivalry, and he was able to sway momentum. And I've said this to you off air in the past, that I feel Dion was actually more valuable to the 49ers than he was to the Cowboys. And the reason I say that is the Cowboys had already won a couple of championships. I liken Dion going there similar to like Durant going to Golden State. You guys were already established champions. When Dion left Atlanta to go to the 49ers, that's when they finally beat you. It was the 3rd consecutive year that you guys faced each other in the title game. And to paint a picture for the viewers that might have not been watching this stuff back then, the NFC Championship during the late 80s into the early to mid 90s was essentially the Super Bowl, because the NFC won 13 consecutive Super Bowls in a row, which will probably never be duplicated by either conference in any time moving forward. Very unlikely that will ever happen again. But these 2 particular teams were at the height of that, as I alluded to. The Giants won in 90, the Redskins won in 91, but these were teams that were kind of holding on a little bit from the 80s. 49ers were reloading at this point. They took a step back with that hit, the one I told you about. Joe Montana was a league MVP that year when he got knocked out, missed 2 seasons, changed conferences, and retired shortly thereafter. He was never the same guy, but he already had the Hall of Fame resume with the 4 championships in the 80s. But this rivalry has just spanned so many different eras of time. Dion won one with the Niners. Then he went to Dallas, and you guys won your third Super Bowl in 4 years. That year, you did not have to go through the 49ers. The Packers, actually, who I mentioned were on the rise, took care of them, and you took care of the Packers, a team that you dominated during much of that decade. It's wild. It just seems like it's coming all back. And this is why what's happening right now in the NFC is very special to football historians like you and myself. There's just so many legendary players. And right here, ranking the best 49ers and Cowboys during the rivalry years. And what I mean by the rivalry years, I'm talking about the 90s. When they were both on equal footing, truly and thoroughly. The Cowboys, I got Troy Aikman, Emmitt Smith, Larry Allen, Michael Irvin, and Deion Sanders. For the Niners, I have Jerry Rice, Joe Montana, Steve Young, Deion Sanders, and Terrell Owens. Terrell Owens played for both these organizations. But when Terrell was a Cowboy, the Niners were not the same factor that they were in previous years. They were in a bit of a transition post-Young. Garcia had a short little run there. But the Alex Smith CK7 transition wasn't as powerful as what the Young Montana, and I will say even Garcia. I think Garcia was a lot better than people gave him credit for.
He was a great quarterback.
Yeah, he had his years. He had definitely had his years. But
I can't put Terrell Owens on either list, honestly, for one reason, because when you think about the Cowboys and the 49ers of the 90s, T.O. really didn't step onto the stage until the catch that was made against the Packers in the wild card game in the playoffs with the 90s, The
reason I bring him up is because of the heat he caught with the stepping on the star.
But that was in the thousands.
No, I get it, but what I'm getting at is like you can't really tell the story of this rivalry without at least mentioning that dude.
No, I will give you that.
Because he kind of embodies
90s
the
guys.
hatred that they have for each other.
See, if we're talking about 90s guys, I'd be inclined to put even JJ Stokes ahead of not Dion, but Terrell Owens.
I can see that.
JJ was more of an impact player in the 90s than T.O. was. I would say that Ricky Waters should be ahead of T.O. because of what he did in the 90s as a T.O., And it's not taking anything away from T.O. because really T.O., like I said, it was that catch, and then we talk about the Philly, the ankle that Roy Williams caused, leading to the Super Bowl, leading to going to Dallas and the early 2000s stuff. It's nothing against that, but when I'm focusing on the 90s only, it's really hard for me to put T.O. in that conversation.
I get it. And like I said, I think the reason why I mention him is just because when you revisit the hate and the heat that these two have, he is like at the forefront of it because of him being on both sides of the rivalry at different junctures.
I don't think he hated it. I think he wanted to end up in Dallas.
Well, he ultimately did. It was truly when he was playing the last bit of meaningful football because he never made playoffs after that. He had some great years at Romo.
But you got to look at you got to look at the defensive side. Talk about Merton Hanks, the head, the Bob Ronnie Lott, like in the 90s.
Yeah, you had Dana Stubblefield.
Yeah, Bryant Young, who is now a Hall of Famer.
You also had Ken Norton, who played for both teams.
And you can talk about Charles Haley, who also played for both teams. As a multi-Super Bowl.
And that was a common thing, too, where players switch sides on this. Like, people talk about, like, oh, Ray Allen left the Celtics and went to the Heat. Well, this shit was going on in the NFL in the 90s.
It was. And Charles
Haley still Tom teams at the time.
And Charles Haley, up until Tom Brady, was the leading.
But there's so many
winner.
There's so many similarities between both these organizations. They're both 5-time Super Bowl winners. Over the course of the last Okay, Dallas's last Super Bowl was 95. The Niners' last Super Bowl was 94.
All right, so it's this simple. 27-26. We have 1 year on the Niners. So anytime Niners talk, this is what I always say. If you're a Niners fan talking shit about Dallas and Super Bowls, always remember we won right after you. So we always have 1 year on them.
Yeah, that is true. That is true. More recent history and what's more pertinent to what's going on this coming week. Revenge on the mind.
Let's go.
What Dallas has to do to avenge last year's home loss to the Niners at AT&T. Now the venue has switched. This is the first time these two are going head to head in that venue since the 94 season in a playoff game. That's the Dion game. That's the Emmett playing injured game. Well, he played injured a lot, but that is the first time these two were linking up in that city again. So what do your Cowboys need to do to pull off the road upset?
Honestly, well, look, at Levi Stadium, Dallas is not lost. I've been present for a few of those when I was stationed in California while in the it's quite simple, honestly. Play like you play tonight. Run the ball and do not force Dak to make decisions. Tonight, we forced Tampa Bay to make decisions, and that's what led to Dak having a great game. And that's what's been the success to Dallas all year.
I think you have a chance, and I'll tell you why. I feel that while Brock Purdy has played phenomenally well, given his lack of experience at the NFL level, you did make a good point that with the exception of the Washington Commanders, he hasn't truly played a stout defense. And Dallas does bring issues where if they can limit the Niners on first and second downs, put them in third and not so manageables, and make Brock Purdy have to throw the ball a little more than the 49ers want to, then yes, indeed, Dallas can win this game. Where I'm not going to give my solid prediction just yet.
Me neither.
But as the week moves along, we're going to dive into all four of these games a little deeper. We did a way too early preview yesterday, but we didn't have the whole field. We were given hypotheticals, things like that, talking about Lamar's future because the Ravens season had just ended. But this is 2 years in a row now that these two are locking horns. And it brings me to this, the beast of the East, best of the West. And the reemergence of the Niners in the NFC East, like I said, gives us the 80s and 90s vibes. It's wild because when I think about the dominance that the NFC had, it all was predicated with how good the East was. The only difference is now Philly is powerful where Washington isn't, but you still got your Cowboys, you still got your Giants, And it's just so funny that it lines up with Buffalo being America's darling in the AFC. And this is a Buffalo team that in any other era of professional football would have won multiple Super Bowls. But for 4 straight years, they ran into buzzsaws. Oddly enough, and I've said this in a humble way, that I do believe the 1990 Buffalo Bills were better than the 1990 New York Giants. I think Bill Parcells and Bill Belichick together had the perfect game plan to beat that Buffalo team. Then when you fast forward 91 through 93, they really ran into buzzsaws. The Cowboys and Redskins, those 3 seasons were just too powerful for them. Giants quickly, after winning the 90s Super Bowl, lost a lot of their leadership. Tom Coughlin had gone to Boston College. Bill Belichick had gone to the Cleveland Browns. And Bill Parcells surprised the organization by having an impromptu retirement. And that upset the organization because they probably would have kept either Coughlin or Belichick. And that did change the trajectory for the Giants for a while. The Giants did not get back to respectability. You'd have to go back to Dan Reeves. Oddly enough, I mentioned Dan Reeves, rest in peace. Dan Reeves, former Bronco coach, former Cowboy player, former Atlanta Falcon coach as well. One of the greatest coaches to never win a Super Bowl as a coach. What I do want to say about Dan Reeves, and it's interesting, this fact came up yesterday. Brian Daboll is only the second Giants coach to win his first. He's the first Giants coach to win his first playoff game as the head coach of the Giants since Dan Reeves. Oddly enough,
Get the fuck out of here, really?
Oddly enough,
Excuse my language. Wow.
Oddly enough, that was against the Minnesota Vikings, and that was Lawrence Taylor and Phil Simms' final home game, because the next week, the 49ers beat the crap out of the Giants, and moments after the game, Lawrence Taylor's post-game presser, he essentially announced his retirement with Phil Simms sitting next to him. Going into that next season, Phil Simms found out that he was released while listening to the radio. And that ushered in an uncomfortable thing for Dan Reeves. And then we had the problems at the quarterback position. Dave Brown, Danny Cannell, Kent Graham, Danny Cannell, Kent Graham again. And the Giants didn't get stability at that position until Kerry Collins helped take them to a Super Bowl in 2000. And then this guy right here, Mr. Eli Manning, third most consecutive starts at the position. But
Richie, name those quarterbacks again.
You had Dave Brown after Phil Simms. Well, actually, let me hold on. In 91, we started Hostetler for a short while.
Yeah.
Then Simms took back his job.
Okay.
We challenged you in 93 for the division title, week 17. We came up short in overtime, so we had to settle for a wild card.
Okay.
That was the Viking game I alluded to.
Okay.
LT out, Simms out. Hostetler was gone not long after that to the Raiders. So now we're running with Dave Brown, year 1, 9-7. We didn't get in because of a tiebreaker. We needed the Green Bay Packers to lose. That was the infamous Sterling Sharp neck injury game. They did beat the Bucs. That hurt their chances to beat you, which they didn't beat you that year. So after Dave Brown, it was Kent Graham. Then it was a little more Dave Brown. Then it was Danny Cannell. Then it was Kent Graham again. The one huge moment in the Kent Graham Giant career was the Hail Mary to Amani Toomer.
Oh, I remember that.
That ended Denver's potential undefeated season.
Yep, I remember that.
Kent Graham at best was serviceable, but we took a chance on Kerry Collins. He had an alcoholism issue with the Carolina Panthers. The Saints brought him in for a cup of coffee. Didn't work out. Giants took a flyer on him. He got sober. He played great football. And this is when the Giants' defense was starting to emerge with the likes of Jesse Armstead, the likes of Michael Strahan, who ultimately carved out a Hall of Fame career, the late Jim Fossil, also with the help of Sean Payton, who was the offensive coordinator, took us to the 2000 Super Bowl. We ran into arguably the greatest defense in league history. Fossil was out a few years later. Collins had a season-ending injury, which led to the Phillip Rivers draft, traded for Eli Manning, and the rest is history. Eli to Jones. So it has essentially, it's interesting. It just always seems that whenever my team has gotten anywhere, we had to go through the Niners or the Cowboys. We have had to go through the Niners 3 times to win 4 of our Super Bowls. 3 of those times, with the exception of 2007, we had to go through the 49ers. So it's very interesting. And what I also find interesting is that you always have this GOAT debate. Tom Brady, Joe Montana, Tom Brady, blah, 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 about the quarterback GOAT. And
it depends on the narrative, really.
No, it does. But, these things are the ultimate sell point when it comes to this shit, whether it's fair or not. And the reality is those 2 were the biggest winners, convincingly, yada, yada. So we had to go through Brady twice, and we had to go through Montana twice. So that in itself is incredibly interesting.
Do you remember a guy, a pitcher, his name was Drew Henson?
Of course I do, Michigan.
Okay.
He actually was ahead of Tom Brady on the depth chart.
Yeah, he was.
Isn't that wild?
But guess who won that championship?
Brady won the. If I'm not mistaken, didn't Brady get an opportunity in the Big Ten championship?
Brady won that.
He did. I do, that does ring a bell, but I'd be lying.
Brady was benched for the likes of Drew Henson.
I see,
but wasn't. What about Clint Stoner?
Oh, another thing about Drew Henson, he was a Yankee farmhand as well.
That's exactly why I said Drew Henson.
And speaking of Tom Brady, you probably know this. He was in the Expos minor league.
Yeah, he was. I know. I was going to say Expos, but I don't think a lot of the viewers today, unless they're older like us, know who the Expos really are.
The Washington Nationals now.
And hey, by the way, Pablo Guerrero, Vladimir Guerrero, he played for the Expos. In case everyone's wondering.
Yeah.
His son Pablo Guerrero, he did in fact sign with the Rangers, so I'm happy about that. By the way,
that's cool. That's exciting.
Anyways, I mean, he's only 16, so. But his talent is unbelievable. But no, I will say, as you were naming Giants quarterbacks, and I'm sitting here thinking about the quarterbacks I've had to deal with, and I think about the Clint Stoners, the Anthony Wrights, the Vinny Testaverde at the end of his career. Quincy Carter. Well, Quincy Carter
Drew Bledsoe.
Quincy Carter was a second-round pick that decided that he wanted to snort cocaine. And
what about Drew Bledsoe?
Drew Bledsoe was a quarterback that he was already dethroned by Tom Brady, and everyone already knew.
I'll be honest, looking back at Drew Bledsoe's career, not trying to take a crap on the guy.
He had a great career. He just never was in the right position.
Levels, I feel like he's kind of like wrong place, wrong time, kind of like an Alex Smith.
Yeah, that's exactly what he is. He was always in the wrong position. Even in Super Bowl, what was it, 35? Or 30 Super Bowl 33.
No, back it up. It was 29. When he lost to the Packers?
No, 29 was the 49ers versus Chargers.
Are you talking about when he lost to the Packers?
Yeah. Super Bowl 31 was the Broncos. Super Bowl 32 was the Broncos. Super Bowl 33.
It wasn't 32. It doesn't matter. The point is, the 96 Super Bowl, or 97 game, Reggie White game, Desmond Howard game.
Shoot, God, I know. I really have to think about this now. Anyways, Drew Bledsoe, it wasn't that he wasn't. I mean, the guy was just wrong place. Like, he was doing well, he gets hurt, and that was his career.
But truth is, he wasn't doing that well then. Because I'll be honest with you, and we talk about this a lot with coaches and relationships, quarterbacks, and blah blah blah. Bill Belichick was 5-11 in his inaugural campaign in New England. Tom Brady threw like 4 passes that year. 2000, a lot of people forget, 2000 was Brady's rookie year. 2001, he gets the opportunity in week 2. They started the season 0-2. They lost that game to the Jets. And it's just weird how things work out. It is just so weird how things work out, and I said it already, how the Leonard Marshall hit, I feel on some levels, allowed the 49er dynasty to go backwards. The Herschel Walker trade, we know about that, and the other maneuvers that you alluded to that Jimmy made. But one thing that goes without saying, and that is why this is such an exciting time, is that the way I look at it is you have one of the most vibrant general managers in a John Lynch. You have a Dallas Cowboys team that's done a hell of a job of bringing in great young talent. Micah Parsons, one of the true great draft picks that's going to go down as one of the best ones when it's all said and done.
He is Defensive Player of the Year.
It's debatable, but we'll see. It's debatable.
But hold on, let me ask you, Richie. What do you base it on?
I base it on a lot of things.
Exactly. So what exactly are you basing it on? Because are you basing it on sacks alone? Okay, yeah, then Nick Bosa gets it. Are you basing it on sacks and pressures? Well, quarterback pressures, Micah Parsons leads that. And Micah Parsons also plays linebacker. What are you basing it on? And
I'm basing it on, in my opinion, I think it's more difficult when you got your hands in the dirt and you got to get through somebody initially. as opposed to coming behind somebody that's already tangled with somebody else.
And that's what Micah Parsons does. He puts his hand in the dirt, and he's still the guy making plays.
I think it's debatable. I'm not even thinking about that award right now. It's debatable.
No, I bring this up actually, and I bring this up because I want you to listen to this.
And to be unbiased, I think TJ Watt, when healthy, beats them both, and that's being unbiased.
Well, here, like I said, I will bring this point up because there's one player that I think about for next year and the years going on that's going to sit there and battle with Michael Parsons, TJ Watt, and Nick Bosa, and his name is Kayvon Thibodeau.
I agree.
So you're talking about a guy that he puts his hand in the dirt, but yet Micah Parsons can literally put his hand in the dirt at any position on the defensive line, and he can also play any position on the line.
What makes it exciting is that you got Howie Roseman. I hate that team, but you got to give him his due. He is such a great.
He's a great GM.
He's a great GM. Bottom line, John Lynch is a great GM, and then you have these two storied franchises with your team and my team that have their own fair share of a rich history, and these are your four best teams in the NFC. I said it to someone on social media who's a big Cowboy fan, and I said it. I said the four best teams in the NFC are the four that are still remaining. Yeah, I get it. The Vikings were a 13-win team, but they were also paper tigers. Quinton said it. I said it. You said it. All different junctures. We were all proven right when it counted. And this is just a very exciting time because, in my opinion, three of these teams that are in the NFC are three of the greatest teams in the history of the NFC. I would extract Philly. I would put in Green Bay if we're talking about the full body of work. 100%. But in no particular order, because that's going to come on another show during Pro Bowl week. But I would have to say that it's the Green Bay Packers, it's the New York Giants, it's the Dallas Cowboys, it's the San Francisco 49ers. That is the cream of the crop when it comes to the class of the NFC. I will say this, though. If the Philadelphia Eagles start ripping off some Super Bowls, they will start gaining rank because the Eagles have always been competitive. You got to go back to their pre-merger where they really, that was a big drought in between beating the Lombardi's Packers and beating Belichick's Patriots. That was quite the it's funny. They beat the guy who won the original Super Bowl and they beat the guy who won the most Super Bowls. But there was a lot of heartache and a lot of stuff in between. But, I grade these franchises on different junctures of their existence. When I'm talking about the greatness of the Giants, I'm not going to be thinking about Ray Perkins. I'm not going to be thinking about Ray Handley. I'm not going to be thinking about friggin' Danny Cannell and Joe Pisarcik and those guys. I'm talking Eli Manning.
Did you just say Danny Cannell?
Yeah.
You really just said Danny Cannell. That's awesome.
Yeah, and he really was the starting quarterback when we blew that lead to the Vikings.
Yeah, I know. That's why.
But I'm going to throw all that negative energy out. We took care of business against the Vikings. It was an amazing win. You guys took care of business against the most winningest quarterback in the history of the NFL. Welcome to the club. You knocked him out of the playoffs too now. And I got to say, the East is back. I'm looking forward to doing a real detailed show on breaking down the game. I wanted to kind of have like a lighthearted, kind of like an educational but fun chat about the history of this great rivalry, Niners and Cowboys. And I was also able to sprinkle in my team because my team has had a lot to do with you guys as well. We've had some serious battles.
I'm going to say one thing and one thing only. Just one thing.
Yeah.
When we're talking about the history of the NFC East, whether it's between the Niners, the Cowboys, the Eagles.
And the Niners are always the constant guest because they always run into us, like us being the division.
Exactly. And this time around,
the best compliment I could give the 49ers, they play like an NFC East team.
Who are the most battle tested?
What now?
Who are the most battle tested out of the four teams?
This particular year?
Yeah. And I'm basing this on only one thing, and that's the quarterback position. Because we could sit here and say, "Oh, well, the Niners are this and that." We could
No. I wasn't going to pick them.
It's Niners are the least battle-tested team.
To be completely honest with you, and I don't want to sound like a homer right now, the most battle-tested this year is my team, and I'll tell you why. Because my team has had to deal with more adversity in terms of health and in terms of roster limitations than anybody else in the field right now.
That's it. All right. I like that.
It has nothing to do with them being my team. It has to just do with the fact of we lost so many people this year. And you know, our second best pass rusher, Azeez Ojulari, has missed so much time. Kayvon missed time. We had to deal with X-Man and Adoree being gone. And this has crossed my mind. If X-Man and Adoree don't go down at the same time, do the Giants have more than 9 regular season wins? Is it closer to 11? I'm going to say maybe. I don't know if we would have necessarily caught Dallas because we would have had to overcome those 2 losses to you in the standings. So I'm not going to go that far. But I must say, the Giants are my answer for that reason alone. You have a rookie head coach. You have an embattled quarterback in Daniel Jones going into the year. You have Saquon Barkley fighting for his future to prove that he's still a top 5 running back and still that dude. And, you know, practice squad. Isaiah Hodgins from Buffalo's practice squad. Richie James, you know, very late round pick. You lose your emotional leader, Sterling Shepard. Kadarius Toney was a bit of a cancer, so we shipped him out. And it took balls to ship out a talent like Toney when you were already hurting at the wide receiver position. Not to mention that you have a $72 million man who hasn't been able to really get reps because Brian Daboll doesn't view him as what's best for the team. So when I think about battle tested, yeah, I think the Giants have been through quite a lot. I don't know if the story ends this coming week, but what I do know is that my team is more than headed in the right direction, and the culture has truly changed back to Giants pride. I must admit that.
So, what would you say is the one thing, the one true thing? Remove your fan cap, remove everything. That going into Philly next week,
yeah,
you already know that Philly has swept you this season. The
Indeed.
second game was a more respectable loss. The first game was a little bit of a.
It was a lot of beat down.
So what's the one thing? What's the one thing that Philly has on you guys? What's the one thing that you would say that if you were the Giants head coach, if you were Brian Daboll, if you were, I mean, and by the way, Martindale has got an interview for a head coaching position this week. But
yeah,
what's the one thing that you would say that, well, this is what we need to fix?
Well, I feel that we've got to get a little better at covering tight ends, and we've got to get better at just consistently stopping the run. I think Minnesota did us some favors this past week with their play calling. I don't think they leaned on Dalvin Cook the way they should have. That's my personal opinion. The Giants have been a mixed bag with stopping the run.
Yeah.
And when you factor in that the Eagles literally have the best offensive line in football, I must admit that it's going to be a tall task. The reason I think my team has a chance is because there is a massive belief in that locker room that was non-existent. Not non-existent in terms of being afraid of somebody, but I do think that beating that Philly put on us actually got our heads right because the Jihad Ward meltdown, and he is one of our emotional leaders, Lawrence Taylor calling out the guys, saying show some balls, and they go into Washington and definitely show some balls. I feel that the Eagle loss, the first game when they pounded us down in the Meadowlands, I actually think that changed the ceiling of our season because I think it brought our team together. And
So
now And now we have a chance to look at our bullies in the face and see if we can put our belief and make it into fruition on the football field if we can pull one of the greater upsets of this football season. And I think it's
one of the things that's been harping Dallas was the fact that Tyler Biadasz was out for a few weeks, and you could tell with the run game. He came back tonight, and the run game was very successful.
In our case, it was X-Man and Adoree. I think those two really hurt us bad.
Yeah. Now, you go into next week. Lane Johnson is supposed to come back.
I'm sure he's going to play.
Who do you put at that left defensive end, and who are you going to put at the right defensive end? And these are honest questions. What do you do? Because when you include a Lane Johnson back into that lineup with a Travis or a Jason Kelce, and what they can do and what they have shown time and time again, what do you do? What do you do to stop them? And I'm asking, I'm taking the Giants to win. I just want to know your opinion.
I think you got to give them different looks. I think you got to do things that they're not always going to expect. I think Landon Collins has to serve a couple of purposes. There are certain times where you got to put him right into the mesh. Just send him in to blow up gaps and hope that he's guessing right. Sometimes you're going to ask Landon to play possum to spy out Hurts and to also play the sideline to the best of his ability. Because Landon is a former safety. Now he's deployed more as a linebacker. Hang on one second. I got to plug in this computer.
No, I definitely agree with Richie is saying on all these levels, because when you really look at it and you really break down the teams, you have to look at one thing. All right, so the Giants defense, their defensive pass rush has improved a lot. And when you look at week 18 and what that Giants pass rush had to do against that Eagles front five, their front, the Eagles actually had a better game plan against them, or the Giants did. And a lot of truth can be told that Lane Johnson wasn't there, this and that. Lane Johnson is still the greatest right tackle in the NFL, but the fact is that the Giants' defensive line has gotten better, and I think they actually give a challenge to a Jason Kelce or a Lane Johnson.
I must admit, though, the loss of Ojulari, I'll be honest, if we win, he might be available for the title game. But I do think it's a big ask to think that he's going to come back playing on Sunday, getting hurt, and playing on a Saturday. There is a chance. But because of the magnitude of the game, I think the Giants are going to try to do everything in their power to see if this guy can get in there, even if he's on a snap count. Because Ojulari makes plays when he's on the field. He's just had some shit luck.
Well, so is Dexter Lawrence.
Well, Dexter Lawrence is having a career year.
And you're going to need that career year from him.
And I must say, you can't always keep all the players you love. Dalvin Tomlinson left because they prioritized Leonard Williams and they knew what they had with Dexter. They also let B.J. Hill go to Cincy because they knew what they had with Dexter Lawrence. And I think the Giants were right about that. It wasn't popular at the time. But I must admit, I saw Dalvin Tomlinson have one signature play where he planted Barkley and, he helped him up. They're friends. And I just looked at him and said, "What's up, Dalf?" You know what I'm saying? Like, there's certain players.
He's going to be a Cowboy next year.
Yeah. There's certain players that you love, like Jonathan Hankins, Giant draft pick, planted Tom Brady tonight.
He played a silently good game and made a play when he was supposed to.
Jalen Smith has been a great addition to our team. Last year, a lot of people thought it was smoke and mirrors because we weren't playing meaningful football in December. I was very pleased that this different coaching staff believed that he was worth bringing back. And I'm so happy that they took that chance because I think they realized that Jalen still has something in the tank. He's never going to be the player that Dallas had or that Notre Dame had. But at this juncture of his career, he is perfect for what the Giants do right now. I also think Landon Collins is pitching his case to potentially be invited back next year.
I don't think he's pitching his case. I think he already won that case.
I hope so.
I think Jalen, here, look, I'll tell you from a
You need guys like that on championship teams.
You do. And that's what I was about to get to, because I love Jalen. I've loved Jalen
He
since he was coming
reminds
to
me
high
at this
school.
juncture of his career, similarly to back in the late 90s, early 2000s when we had Mike Barrow.
You could talk about what's his name from the Panthers, Thomas Jones,
Thomas
Thomas
Davis?
Davis. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, granted, it wasn't 3 ACL tears for Jalen Smith as opposed to
But he
what.
went through a lot of hell after collegiate. Even with Dallas, he had to wait. He took the long road. But the thing I've always liked about Jalen is that I always feel that he's never quit, even when the odds were against him, and he always finds a way back to a team.
He's got this right here, and
No, absolutely.
I could tell you from meeting him personally, I could tell you from having a conversation with him that he will not be disgruntled. He can be released by multiple teams.
He's one of the great guys in the league, and I'm pleased. I always think it's like a home run being a Notre Dame fan. Whenever my Giants score one of those guys, like a Justin Tuck or a Julian Love or a Luke Pettigrew going back a minute, but I always am super hyped when this happens. Even Lewis Nix, rest in peace.
I was there for that game.
He didn't have the story that these other Notre Dame guys did, but the point is like I'm always get super hyped when we get Notre Dame guys in the building, and Jalen Smith is one of those guys that to me transcended the rivalry. Like, I didn't care if he was a Cowboy. I know what he went through, and he was going to be a guy that I was always going to pull for. But to get him on our team is like a bonus.
No, I mean, as a Notre Dame fan, a guy that was there in 2012 watching, well, it was the 2012 season. It was Thanksgiving, watching Notre Dame beat USC to go to the national title game and watching the effects that Lewis Nix had and all. It's just like, and I always want to see any Notre Dame alum succeed.
Yeah, for sure. It was just sad. It hit me with the way Lewis Nix's story ended and his life ended. Like that sucked. But,
I have to say one thing. Prayers go out to Georgia. The University of Georgia, after their big loss that they suffered this weekend. Not something that you go through as a university, but what they had to go through this weekend, it was like, wow, like, especially after just now winning the National Football Championship and stuff like that, like, it's big. So it's a very, I don't want to say it's a similar situation, but it's big in the state of Georgia. It's big in college sports altogether. So, and that's why as we're talking about Lewis Nix, it's like, man, like Nix was he was already a graduated person out of Notre Dame. He was playing in the NFL, and where this is a situation now where we're seeing two collegiate athletes playing for the University of Georgia, and an unfortunate event took place. So, but yeah. It's just, I'm gonna get emotional now.
No, it just puts into perspective that life's thin, and at the end of the day, you gotta maximize all of it because tomorrow is definitely not promised, and not to go like total cheese mode. But even as like a hyper fan, this is why what's happening right now in this particular football season, and that's what makes it sweet too, because when you go through the trials and tribulations of being a fan, and when you finally get back and you're starting to sniff like, oh damn, if we win this week, your team, my team collectively, we're going to the NFC title game for the rights to decide who goes to the Super Bowl. And even if it ends this week, it was a hell of a run for each of our teams. I will, no offense to your team, I think it's a little bigger statement of mine if we, you know what I'm saying, because we had lower expectations. But I'm looking forward to this preview show. We're coming up on the final minute here, but
look, Wild Card Weekend has, without a doubt, been one of the greatest wild card weekends we can say. Giants are going on, Cowboys are going on, Eagles, Niners cannot sleep on either team. It's going to be a great divisional round. I leave the rest to you, Richie.
From your mouth to God's ears, it would be really cool to meet in the NFC title game. that will be decided, and we're gonna give our detailed breakdown later this week. As always,